And you're very, very welcome back to episode 17 of the Women's National League podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. My name is Breifne and Aaron, and joining me once again is Aaron Clark. You're very welcome back to the show, Aaron.
Good evening, Breifne. Looking forward to it.
Another week, and what a week it's been. Of course, cup action over the weekend. One no-show. We'll talk a bit more about that later on in the programme, but a couple of really, really good cup clashes with all of the drama that comes out of it. And then, unfortunately, a few one-sided games with some of the non-league sides, the qualifiers to the Intermediate Cup. We'll talk about the standards maybe in the game as well, Aaron, later on in the show. But first of all, at any games over the weekend, what's your thoughts? Did you get to catch any of them?
Yeah, I was at Sligo and I was at Galway and Bohs, the contentious one where we had the penalty decision. Flew back from the UK on Saturday morning, so I scooted to my local. Wasn't the best of games, you know. It was a bit of a dreary affair. Galway had some good chances. Bohs tried to push, but just couldn't push on in the final third. And sort of when it came to extra time, you could see the legs on both sides starting to pull up a little bit. And as we talk about the contentious penalty that ended up winning the game for Erica Burke, who'll join us later, It was, you know, it was one of them games that you were sort of, I hate to say this, but nearly looking for the final whistle to come when extra time ended. It wasn't great, but compared to the other games, it was the one with the least goals I picked.
Yeah, a single goal game. What's that about this weekend? Let's maybe talk about let's get the bad stuff out of the way. Erica Burke will be joining us to talk about that game, that penalty call. I know a lot of debate on Twitter over the weekend about whether it was a penalty, whether it wasn't. I know we differ maybe on what we see it, which is going to lend maybe to a bit of debate when we take sides when Erica comes to join us later on the program. But another thing that caused a lot of contention, I got a lot of stick on Twitter over the weekend about my views on maybe the standard of the competition and the structure of the competition, because we saw some enormous mismatches, an aggregate score of 30-0 between the Women's National League sides and the qualifiers from the Intermediate Cup. And that's 3 of the games because one didn't even happen. It's a bit of a concern, surely, for the integrity of that competition and how, like, because I don't think anybody really benefited from that. I know some of the non-league teams contacted me to say that they quite enjoyed the day, even though they didn't beat them by 7-0 or whatever on the day. But your thoughts?
Do you know what? It's tough because you see how non-league sides have had a bit of success in the cup in the previous years. The Shelbourne under-18 side that we talked about a little bit last week. You look at other teams that have had wins, and then when you see this, you know, Peamount 3-0 up after 10 minutes, 8-0 up at half time, your only concern then is how many they're going to score. It's not even if Inglis will get one back, or then when you look at Whitehall, that was probably the game we said if anybody were going to get a bit of a sniff of result, that might be one. But Athlone are obviously the form they're in, and Cork City putting 7 past Bonagee. Fair play to Bonagee travelling, considering they could have easily done what happened with Douglas Hall and pulled out. But
well, that's not fair on Douglas Hall either, because my understanding is there was an illness within the squad, and given the current circumstances, it could be something other than just a desire not to get beaten, to be fair to them.
Yeah, what was said to me is players just pulled out on Friday, but for me, I think realistically, you know, if it's COVID, you should come out and say it's COVID. But my biggest thing is with Garden Douglas Hall is they were tweeting about James Kabia all weekend and stuff like that. They haven't addressed the situation. That's my biggest concern. Is I'd like to see them come out and address it, because they got slated for it, and probably rightly so. You'd like to see them come out and just say, listen, public, and say, listen, this is what happened. This is why we couldn't. Like when they tell the FAI we couldn't field the team, the FAI don't mention COVID, so they don't give us any backfire. And the problem is when you people in Cork itself saying that the book should be thrown at them, they should potentially be looked at, even put out the Intermediate Cup final because of it, because that's how you qualify. It's a tough one, and I just think I'd like the club to come out and, you know, publicly say something and just say, listen, we couldn't, we apologise. I think the timing was poor, especially considering they played a league game in Cork on either Wednesday or Thursday night. So they fulfilled the fixture early, a day or two earlier, and then it gets pulled. That's what sort of disappoints me the most.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I do honestly believe, and I'm not trying to defend their actions, I don't really think they're defensible. I think no matter what the standard is, if you're in a competition and you're given a fixture, you show up, you fulfill the fixture. If you get beat 16-0, like what happened one of the teams at the weekend, you keep battling till the end, and you hold your head up high when you're leaving the pitch. You might be disappointed, you might be gutted, you might hold a little cry to yourself. but you fulfill the fixture. It's a sporting event. You can only play what's put in front of you, good or bad. But I think to say they should be kicked out of the Intermediate Cup final, I don't think so. I think they're two separate competitions. You couldn't impose one penalty and one that carries into the other. I don't think that would be fair. However, that being said, I do feel that maybe with Douglas Hall that they would have been better off maybe fulfilling the fixture. I don't know. It is what it is. I think we may have lost Aaron. His audio seems to have dropped and he's frozen on us there a second, but he'll be back with us in a couple of minutes' time. But as well as that, of course, there were a whole host of games over the weekend in that cup. 5 games in total played in the first round. Of course, Wexford and Shells, by virtue of being the finalists in last year's competition, they managed to. I'm going to actually just take him off camera for 1 second. But by virtue of last year's competition being finalists, they managed to get the whole way to the second round automatically. They joined all the other sides in the draw this week. We will go through the full draw, which later we might hold on till Erica's with us, and we can actually have that kind of conversation about how she is. They face a home tie against Sligo Rovers in that particular round of the competition. In terms of the actual draw, as it finishes up over the course of the next couple of days, the draw was done on I think Tuesday morning. Athlone Town versus Cork City, Bohemians versus Sligo Rovers, Wexford Youths versus DLR Waves, and I think the tie of the round, Shells and Peamount, will face each other in that quarter final. One of the big guns in, I suppose, the league over the last 3 or 4 years, likely to be ruled out of contention in the next round of games. But I think there's a great opportunity there for some of the teams that have been maybe not quite able to get their seasons up and running as they would like yet this year. Cork City will be relatively happy with the draw to Athlone, or away to Athlone, but at the same time, it's a daunting task for them. Athlone are really on fire this season, while Bohs and Sligo, probably the second most competitive game. I feel that this round, they've had a couple of good clashes in recent weeks. 2-1 win. We're going to talk to Erica Burke about that later on when she joins us in the programme. While Wexford Youths and DLR, well, they've had a couple of cracks off each other already this year, and they'll be more than happy to get through that. Unfortunately, Aaron, just having a few technical issues at the moment. We will come back to him in just a couple of minutes, but maybe let's have a quick rundown through some of the results of the weekend. We mentioned the 16-0 win for Peamount United at the weekend. And that was over Finglas United, one of the mid-table sides in the Dublin League and Eastern League, Women's League. And I don't think anyone saw it coming, but 3 blisteringly quick goals for them in that early exchange, and they were basically blown away in the first 10 minutes. And Aaron joins us again now. Aaron, you're very welcome back. A couple of technical issues, but you're back with us now. Your battery died or something.
Yeah, I've had to swap technology, but apologies about that. But
no problem.
The internet just dropped completely on me for some strange reason.
Well, that is the choice.
Just in terms of, I get what you're saying in terms. I get what you're saying in terms of them being 2 separate competitions, and I understand that. You know, I think realistically, probably what will happen is we suspect they may get a ban from the FAI, from the Senior Cup, and then before get a fine imposed on them. Probably that's what will happen. But it's
no, I think we've
tough one because nobody wants to see that happening in the league.
But I think for me, when we go back to that whole discussion, yeah, no, absolutely, we'll go back to that whole discussion again. I think for me, you have to call into question. I know it's probably inherited from the men's version of the cup, where the intermediate semi-finalists and even the junior teams qualified. Actually, I think it's the last 16 of the intermediate championship come in. The juniors come in then as well. The top 4 in the junior for 20 non-league sides in the men's. But I think the gap in standards between senior, intermediate, and junior in men's football is an awful lot smaller than senior, intermediate. In this case, in women's football, I just don't think the structures are the same when you get down. I got a lot of stick for saying this on Twitter the other day. It wasn't meant at any particular club. I just think it's the reality. It's a local team with local players. You can't compete against it's essentially a provincial club. We are having issues with Aaron's audio there, so he might just drop out, and we come back to him in a couple of minutes' time. So apologies about the technical stuff. Can't really help it when we try and get this live to you in the next couple of minutes. But yeah, some big games in Treaty United. 3 hat-tricks there, 2 hat-tricks there, should I say, in that particular game. Alana McAvoy had 4 goals, and Anya Gorman with 3. There was a couple of OGs in there as well. Sive Doyle hit a fantastic goal. It was just non-stop for Peamount. In terms of the game of the weekend, Emily Cormett with a hat-trick there, 3 for Athlone, while Roisin Malloy, Gillian Keenan, Kelly Brennan and Kaylee Shine also chipped in with a goal each, but they just kept the scoreboard ticking over. And it was almost score minute for minute watching the two games. Cork City 7-0 winners against Bonaghy United. Lauren Singleton, 7 scores on the score sheet for them. Christina Dring, Avian Donnelly, all in the first half, while Chloe Atkinson, Ava Mangan, Sarah Foley and Laura Shine popped up with the 7th goal in that particular game. But now, third time lucky, Aaron is back with us. Aaron.
Hopefully this is the last of it.
Hurrah, we're back. We'll jump back to the conversation. We're kind of jumping all over the place today, but talk to us about your thoughts on that, because I think for me the standard is just not, you can't equate the two. It's like apples and oranges. They're not the same thing.
The gap is massive, and I think COVID made the gap even bigger, and that's the problem. And I think unless there's something intermediate way to bridge it, it's probably going to continue to get bigger. Like, it's unfortunate. Maybe is it a case of how do you justify it in terms of you want them in the cup? I think there's value to be added in the cup with having the non-league sides there, but you don't want to see it. Like a couple of years ago, we seen Manola being beaten 70-1 by Wexford Youth as well, and that was a horrible result as well. And I think it's about bridging a fine gap. I can't see it being closed again anytime soon. If anything, I think it'll probably get bigger.
I saw a really good suggestion on social media over the weekend, and I can't remember who it came from, so apologies for not giving you the credit for your idea. But it was that there would be a split before the draw in the National League. So when maybe the first half of the National League takes place, the first round or maybe the first 2 rounds of games, the top 6 qualify for round 3, and the other 4 would go into round 1 with the 4 non-league sides, and they play each other down to 2 teams who join the 6 for the quarterfinals. And it just felt that seems kind of fair. The non-league sides are going to be up against maybe the lower tier, and no disrespect meant to anyone who might be in that, but the lower tier or the underperforming sides that season, they can have a crack at them. And if they're good enough to beat one of them, then they deserve a crack at a bigger team in the next round or the third round. And it creates that kind of a place for that kind of experience to happen without the risk of going out and facing a Peamount or a team stacked with international experience.
What we used to have a case when there was only 9 teams in the National League, where the top 4 from the league the previous year would qualify automatically into the quarterfinals, and then the top 5, and you play off down that way. But I think you're right. I think it's a good suggestion. I think it's important to strike that balance, because you look at the only really game that was competitive at the weekend was the Galway and Pose game. Treaty run out comfortable. DLR run out comfortable winners against Treaty. Cork running out comfortable winners. But I think the biggest talking point is the aggregate, and that's probably what everybody's looking back on. And I think you're right in what you're saying. Some non-league sides probably did have a good day out. I think Bonaghy United, they stopped in Waterford the night before, trained in Waterford, and then went down to Cork, and just shows you they do take the competition seriously as well, and they look at it as an opportunity. But like, it's tough, and like, it's never nice seeing high cricket scores. But the problem is you also see it in the English FA Cup in the early rounds when the WSL sides first come in, when there's non-league sides in there, and there's things like that. So it's a hard one to strike a good balance on.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one. Any particular highlights over the weekend? I know we didn't get to see the Whitehall game against Athlone. We didn't see any of those 7 goals, but the rest were all available on LOI TV. Any particular strikes take your fancy?
There was a couple. Kate Mooney's goal was nice. Some of the DLR goals were nice. I think I read Kate Mooney scored a record quickest goal for DLR Waves, which is superb. Kate's
10 seconds. 10 seconds, wasn't it?
In the first 30, anyway. It's superb.
It's crazy. It's crazy quick, yeah.
And that's for me. That was probably one of the standouts. And some of the goals, Peamount did score some nice goals in fairness to them, and Cork picked up a couple of good ones as well. But I'm just looking forward to now, the Mountwater ties that have come out of the next round of the Cup. I think there's some absolutely peach of it ties, and some to really look forward to.
Yeah, some really good opportunities there for teams to progress. But one game where there was a bit of a shortage of goals, it took all of 108 minutes, I think, for anyone to find in the back of the net. And that was, of course, at Dalymount, where Bohemians emerged victorious after a late penalty. We'll have a chat about what we think about the decision in a minute. I know it caused consternation online, but the scorer of that penalty, who was not involved in the incident at all up to that, but dispatched the resulting penalty, was Erica Burke, and she joins us now. Erica, causing controversy wherever you go this weather, it seems.
Breifne, you're just breaking up a bit there. I can't really hear you.
We're just talking about the penalty decision the other day, but talk to us about the game at the weekend. First of all, you're welcome to the show, but talk to us about the game and how it went from your point of view.
Yeah, it was a really tough game. It always is against Galway. Last year, I think they beat us once, and we drew against them. We could never seem to win, so it was a really tough game. We knew it would be, but we were just delighted to get the win.
Yeah, I think. Go on. No, I was just going to follow up on that in terms of that, because it's funny. Like, you look at Bohs this year, like, they're getting some wins against teams where they just struggle to get over the line against them, and like, I think, and if you look at their league form, they've only conceded 15 goals so far this season, which is a lot less than they have conceded. And I think that's probably where their foundations have started. And I think Saturday you've probably seen it, because there was periods where Galway peppered the Bohs goal, but they hit the crossbar as well. But Bohs just stood tall, and that was probably the most impressive thing about it.
Yes, like having Rachel there in goals is massive. She's really, between her and Courtney, it's neck and neck who gets picked every week. But she really is top class. And then we have Lisa. I mean, Lisa and Izzy. It's very hard to get past them, and they really demand the best of the midfielders and us up front to help the team in the defence. So I do think our defence is very, very strong. And that's the one thing that Sean focuses on is, we need to be a good defensive team and then focus on the attack.
Yeah, there's a few little gremlins in the works here tonight, unfortunately. Erica, we can hear you perfectly, but there's a bit of a lag. So we might ask you if you wouldn't mind just reconnecting, and we'll come back to you in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, no worries.
So we'll come back to Eric in 2 seconds just to kind of pick that up, because there's a bit of a lapse there in the background. But Aaron, you were at the game at the weekend. Your thoughts on the performance from Bohs?
Defensively solid, and I've watched them multiple times this season. They've always been solid. I think probably still need a little bit more up the front end. Rebecca Cook come back into the side, haven't been absent for the last couple of weeks. I think added a good bit. I think that the biggest thing for them is that you can see they're starting to play the way the management want them to play. It's taking a bit of time for them to get to that structure. And I think when they go forward, they do try and get some good balls into the box. I think probably just a little bit killer edge at the top is what's maybe holding them back a tiny bit, but definitely a massive improvement from the Galway side. From a Galway standpoint, Galway feel that they could have had the game dead and buried with the chances they did have. They just didn't take any of them, and I think that'll be the most disappointing thing for Alan Murphy, is that his side didn't take the chances that presented themselves. Bit of a strange one for me was the fact that Abby Callanan was left on the bench until just before or just after the goal happened for Bohs, which was quite surprising considering Callanan had really lit the league up last season. I know she was away with studies and stuff like that, and then Jenna Slattery not starting as well for Galway with Emma Starr missing. It was a bit of a strange one in terms of setup from Galway. I just thought, compared to the Shelbourne performance, maybe they just lacked that little bit of a killer edge that they had in the last half hour when I seen them against Shelbourne.
Yeah, we're going to go back to Erica. Hopefully we fix the gremlins in the system. Erica, are you with us? Yeah, perfect. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Welcome back. We were just chatting about the game in general, but I suppose from your point of view, Aaron was just saying how it wasn't much of a game to watch from the neutral point of view, but it's kind of ended in a load of controversy. You got the penalty, you got the winning score, but it was the build up to the award of that penalty seemed to have kicked a lot of people off over the weekend. Your thoughts on the incident? Stonewall
penalty.
Oh God, I knew I was in for a fight today. But it's talk us through it from your point of view, because obviously it was at your end of the pitch, so you would have had the best, probably much better view than we had at least.
Yeah, well, I actually couldn't remember. I had to ask one of the girls afterwards what actually happened for the penalty because I genuinely could not remember the actual incident itself. But I watched it back.
Galway couldn't either, so it's grand. It's fine.
I watched it back. I've watched it a few times. I think I.
So we're gonna get you in trouble with half the league either way.
I tell you what, Breifne, I'll answer this question.
You tell me.
So, initially, I thought it was a penalty straight away. Then I watch it back and think, no, it's not. But the one thing I'm going to say, and this is going to get me crucified, and I don't care because I think it has to be said. The amount of times that I've watched balls and they haven't actually got luck. Like you look at last season, there was offside goals that were given against them and no luck had come their way. It's probably the first time they've got a bit of luck in a game of any significance. And, you wouldn't begrudge them on that situation for the fact that, look at the goal against Shelburne, probably offside last year from Pearl Slattery. Then they had one or two in Dalymount that was clearly offside where you look back on video. So for me, they got a bit of luck. And I think we also have to talk about the fact of the Finnish America, because I think it took a lot of composure to parry it into the roof of the net so late on, especially having been an extra time.
Yeah, I have had the pleasure of working with Abigail Ronan in a previous life in Sligo Rovers when she was under 17, and I felt sorry for her. I think we'll agree on the fact that it was a very lucky penalty. How about that? And we'll agree not to fall out over it. But I just felt very hard on the girl, and just the nature of it so late in the game, it just didn't seem right. I personally didn't think it was even close to being a penalty, but it is what it is. We won't go back to you, Erica. We won't get you a suspension or get you in trouble. We'll take that hit for you. Let's talk maybe with the previous week. You played against Sligo Rovers, opened the score on that day, ended up with a 2-1 win, but a really good cut and thrust league game, good competitive match. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was another game that was end to end. And yeah, it was it's just brilliant to win, especially in Dalymount, because I think it encourages more people to come. We've been getting great crowds at the games, particularly that Sligo game. Actually, there was a great crowd. So yeah, Robbo did great to get on the end of the cross for the second goal. But Sligo are again, they have a lot of GAA girls in that team, and they're very tough, very physically strong. So they're always a tough team to come up against. But yeah, again, we're just delighted to win. It's great to be getting these wins because that's really the hurdle that we couldn't get over last season. We drew a lot of games, but we failed to win consistently, and now we're starting to do that, which is great.
I love how you don't mention the actual peach of a goal you scored in that Sligo game from the Lisa Murphy delivery. You just let it bounce, but you don't mention it. It's ever modest.
Oh no, it was an unbelievable ball in from Lisa. I think we'd tried a few up to that point that hadn't worked out, so it was about time that one worked out. And yeah, no, I couldn't believe when the ball kind of fell to my feet. So yeah, I was very happy with that. Yeah.
You mentioned there's a load of GA girls in Sligo, but of course it's a heritage you share yourself with some of those girls. Well established in Kildare ladies football circles, won an All Ireland intermediate back a couple of years ago now. But tell us a bit about kind of growing up and how you ended up in Dalymount. There's a fairly strange journey from the Gaelic football pitches of your youth to Dalymount Park. Can you tell us how that kind of happened?
Yeah, well, soccer has kind of always been my first love, really, even though I never played it up until a couple of years ago. It was, at school, and the second I got home from school, I was out playing football with my brother. I played Gaelic since I was 5, I think. And I was with the Kildare seniors then since I was 16. And I've obviously committed my whole sporting career to Kildare. But yeah, it was last year. Was my first year with the Women's National League. I played a few games for Kinnegad Juniors before that. That was great. It was a great introduction to soccer. And yeah, then the kind of mad story that you're referring to, I think I know what you're talking about, Breifne. It's I used Johnstown Bridge gym quite a lot when I was living back home, and the Irish team, the under-21s, the men use that as their training base a lot of the time. And I saw them all in their their Irish tracksuits. And I just approached one of the coaches. He's a video analyst, I think, Gary Seary. He works with the FAI, and I just asked him if he'd have any idea how to get involved. I suppose I just believed that I could even, give it a go. Believed that I would have something to offer at that level, and I asked him how to get involved, and he said he gave me James Callahan's number from Peamount. So I contacted James, and he invited me up to one of the sessions. And that was the end of the Peamount journey. Anyway, James told me to. I was very happy with that session. I scored one right in the top corner. But he said to go and put myself on the shop window, where it was his words. So yeah, I contacted Bose then on Twitter. Asked them if they were doing any trials, and they invited me up for training. Yeah, last February or last March. Yeah.
We know James watches the show, by the way. So if you've anything you want to say to him, now's your opportunity.
Yeah, briefly just on that. I remember getting a phone. I remember getting a phone call because I'm good friends with the Bows coaching staff, and I remember getting a phone call being like, had I heard of Erica and what was like, and I was like, well, listen, if she's got the elite background in Gaelic football, I was like, what's the worst thing doing? Have a look. And I think I remember being told after a couple of weeks being like, I think we found a bit of a rough diamond here, and I think the likes of Paul Usher probably took a lot of enjoyment out of helping you get along and get the early things going. And I think you seem to settle in quite a lot. I think the one thing defenders hated was the fact that you weren't afraid to use the physicality from the Gaelic football background.
Yeah, I basically owe everything so far to Paul Usher and Sean and Pat and Derek, all the lads at Bowes. Like Usher, especially, myself and him did half an hour, 40 minutes before every training session, just working on the basics, on football feet, as he calls it. Because there is a lot of transferable skills between Gaelic and soccer, but there's also a lot of differences. And even though I'd played soccer with the lads in school and with my brother and everything, I didn't have a lot of the basics down. So that was, getting the simple things was massive for me. And I really feel like it helped me a lot to bed down my place in the team. So yeah, Paul Usher has been huge influence, and Sean obviously as well. He's just brilliant. His soccer brain is unbelievable.
It takes some confidence though to walk up to a national team official and say, I want to play, but I just don't want to just play for the local team. I want to go in at the top. I want to go to the team in the Champions League. Like, what you must have this just innate confidence in yourself and your own abilities in sport to kind of go, no, I know I can do this, and then to actually follow through on that is super impressive.
Yeah, I think that there's always like a little bit of doubt, but even when there's a bit of doubt, I'll still go and do it anyway if I feel like I'd regret not doing it. And definitely, like soccer, there was no way that I wasn't going to go for it. Like, my dream has always been to play for Ireland, even when I didn't even play soccer. So there was no way that I was never going to do it. It was just a matter of time, really. And yeah, I suppose I must have been feeling pretty brave on that day, but yeah, I've no regrets anyway.
And I suppose just to continue that point, I do know maybe 10, 15, even 20 years ago, the idea that a girl would come up from outside of the major soccer strongholds, maybe find this sport at university and be in an Irish under 19 or even a senior camp inside 6 or 12 months, it wasn't that uncommon. It happened maybe once every year or two in the mid-noughties. But to be 4 or 5 years older than that group, and again, to be out of college, to be kind of in your early to mid-20s and taking that step into the elite level of the sport is, like, what was going through your mind the first time you went out? Because you only played a handful of games yourself.
Yeah, well, I remember our Kildare captain, Grace, she drove me up to the first training session because I was really, really nervous. Like, I had no clue what to expect at all. So for those first few training sessions, I was extremely nervous, but they went well. And then in the first couple of matches, I scored on my debut, so that kind of settled me into it. It was a tap in. It was an easy tap in, but still a goal. So I don't know. I think the extra work that I was doing with Paul really did help my confidence. We did a lot of finishing work, and so I think it did. I don't know. I feel like I settled in pretty quick. I don't know whether that's just kind of you have to do it, or I don't know what it is, but yeah, I felt comfortable there at Bows from the start for sure.
Am I right in saying that was against Treaty? Was that the opening day of the season, 7-0 or something like that? A big score.
No, I didn't play that game. I against Cork. Yeah.
Breifne was actually there for the first Women's National League goal, believe it or not. I was actually at the game, and the thing is about it was you could see how much it even meant to you at the time, Erica, because as Breifne says, going into a new environment, I think it sort of took a bit of shackles off you as well, because you went and you got a couple of goals, then a couple of games later you continue to just go step on step and just move on from there. And if we look at you from now to where you were then, how would you assess Erica Burke the footballer then to Erica Burke the footballer now?
I think that when I started with Bows, I didn't know how much I didn't know, if you get me. I had huge belief in myself, but to get a starting place in this Bows team constantly, I had to change a lot. Tactically, I had to learn so much. I think that's probably the main thing is tactics wise. I do think I've learned so much from the lads, and I think I'm a more rounded player now. I've always been a decent finisher and everything like that, but from tactics and physicality wise and everything, I think I'm a more rounded player.
My main concern, my main question now is for your teammate in Kildare, the captain Grace, who you've just outed as being the person who drove you away from Kildare to is she going to get a suspension back in Kildare now for that?
No, they're very supportive. They always have been. They support anyone that wants to go off and follow their dreams. So no, I'd still involved with Kildare whenever I can be. It's just unfortunate this year I went back to them and then ended up getting injured, so I missed out. But no, the Kildare girls are great. They're very supportive. So hopefully Grace won't get in trouble.
Aaron, you want to jump in or?
No, go ahead if you want to go.
I was just going to say, obviously, that brings us to kind of this weekend and the game against Treaty, who have struggled this season. It's a chance maybe for teams to get an opportunity to try out new things, maybe blood a few players as well. But without getting complacent. I know we spoke off air about it, and you were saying that you couldn't get complacent. But how do you approach a game from that when you're on a good run of form, you're scoring in the last couple of games, and things are starting to pick up both for you and the team, and you're looking to keep building on that momentum?
Yeah, well, if we were to go into this weekend with any sort of mindset other than the mindset that we've gone into the last few games, I think we'd come out with a loss or a draw, because we went into the Cork game a couple of months back like that, and Cork beat us. So we had been on the back of a good couple of results that going into that game, and Cork ended up beating us. So I do think it's very important to have the same mindset that we've had the last few weeks. We've three wins in a row now. We want to make it 4. We're hoping to come out of this weekend with a good result, but you have to show every team the respect they deserve.
Yeah, well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. The very best of luck to you for the rest of the season. And you never know how things will finish. Wouldn't it be lovely to see you in a green jersey in the next couple of seasons, just to put that little full stop at the end of that particular story. Erica, thanks so much for joining us. I hope Grace Clifford is still talking to you when you get home after getting her in trouble with the whole GA.
And James Callahan.
Yeah. You don't really care about James, to be fair, but it's you'd be quite happy to put one in the back of the P-Man net later on in the season as well. Listen, Erica, thanks for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to chat to you, and the best of luck.
Thanks very much, lads. Cheers.
Oh, I cut her off a little bit too early, but thank you there for Erica for coming on. Fantastic story about how literally you come from not having kicked the football competitively, really, other than a handful of games as a juvenile, into a national league and kind of making an impact and being part of a really, really good growing and progressing Bohemian side this season.
Absolutely, and I think when she first came into it, you could see she had potential, and like the guys to talk about the work that Paul O'Shea had done with her, and she spoke for herself, and like to see the improvement she's made, Breifne, over the space of time, you probably wouldn't have expected it. I think she may have been further ahead if she hadn't had the foot injury that she had earlier in the season as well. Probably knocked her back a little bit, but the fact that she talked about Bohs going for a third consecutive win in all competitions, like they haven't done that in the National League beforehand. So this is the first time that they've managed to put a bit of a run going ahead. And I think the win against the likes of Peamount, the draw against Peamount, the running Shells close at the start of the season, running Wexford close, that sort of, I think, kicked them on another little bit. And if they can get a couple of the injured players back, the likes of Katie Burdis, Kieran Marr, Sinead Taylor's obviously going to be a bit away. But if they can get them back, they're three starters who will definitely add to them. And if they can add some players in the window as well, there's no reason why they couldn't push on in the second half of the season.
Yeah, no, I fancy Bohs to really push on. Haven't quite done it, but they're on the edge of it. And I really think a little bit of form we're seeing from them. Another win this weekend, if they were able to, I suppose, go with form, to be fair, and take the 3 points from that clash with Treaty. It starts building that. That's 3 wins on the bounce. And as Erica said off air before she came on, they've got 3 wins on the bounce in Dalymount now. And that kind of belief that they can go out and win every week is important. We saw how Athlone benefited from that early on in the season. So the very best of luck to Bohs and to Erica and her teammates over the next couple of weeks. Moving on, I suppose this weekend, we have talked at length about that fixture between Bohemians and Treaty, but there's another set of fixtures as well. Sligo Rovers, they make up for not having a game last weekend. They play Athlone. A couple of Sligo girls, former Sligo players involved in that Athlone side. DLO Waves, they face Wexford Youths in a practice run for the Cup clash, while Bohs and Treaty, they also meet in Dalymount at 2 p.m. Peamount and Shells, another practice run for a cup game, 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, while Galway Women's FC and Cork, they will do battle at 6 p.m. Anything stand out there to you, Aaron?
The obvious one is Peamount and Shelbourne. That is the obvious one. The fact that Shelbourne have lost Chloe Mustaki, Jess Sue, Gloria Douglas, and Saoirse Noonan, that they're four quality players. They'll probably rely a little bit more on the likes of Gemma Quinn up top. Noel probably hasn't relied on her as much. Scored a hat-trick against Treaty. Physical could be interesting if she starts up top, how she gets on. I think from a Peamount point of view, James O'Callaghan, I remember listening to him after the game against DLR, and he started saying they need to let the shackles go. If they play with shackles at the weekend, Shells could cripple them, and I think he'll want them just to go out and have a bit of fun and express themselves. The DLR and Wexford game is interesting for the fact that Wexford are looking to try and keep that pressure on Shelbourne. If they drop points and Peamount drop points, Athlone could go up into second place. So Athlone will be watching over their shoulders. I think Sligo won't be an easy game for them. The Athlone in Sligo. The fact that Sligo are making improvements. I think they were a little bit unlucky with the goal they conceded against the Erica Burke one in particular. I think it was just a nice finish, but the second one probably is preventable. And I think if they'd have left Bohs with a draw, they'd have been absolutely buzzing off the back of that. So they'd be looking to sort of make up for that. I think it's going to be a good weekend of fixtures. Danny Murphy's already talking about he's seen improvements from his side, so Cork can push on again. Emma Starr not involved in the Galway side as well. Big loss for them, and I think that's one that could probably go either way.
Absolutely. Taking a look at the league table, of course, Shells comfortably on top of the table after 15 games. Of course, 27 games in this season's campaign, so 12 games left for every single club. Shells, 7-point gap. I think it's fair to say if they do win against Peamount at the weekend, that is probably any hope that Peamount have of a league title gone up in smoke. There'd be 13 points with only 11 games left on the calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right there. But the only thing is, if it goes the other way, they still have to play Peamount again. They still have to play Wexford again. So it's all. Plus, they won't want to play the likes of Athlone. So it's all to play for. And I think the fact that they've got Shells have got a run of games where they're going to have to play that game before the Champions League against Bohs is coming up as well on a midweek. So they'll be just looking to try and get a little bit of consistency going into the Champions League. Where for Peamount, I think the Finglas result, while the scoreline wasn't great from a Finglas point of view, I think Peamount will still take a bit of confidence from scoring 16 goals, and they look to try and put in another performance, especially in PRL Park, where they beat Shelbourne 5-0 last year.
Yeah, and of course, if you take a look at the top scorers in the league table, 16 goals so far for Anya O'Gorman, 15 for Emily Corbett, 11 for Stephanie Roach, El Malloy in 4th place on 10, with Noel Murray, Sive Doyle, and a handful of players on 7 goals there as well. Kylie Murphy and Avril Brearley amongst them. It's going to be an interesting weekend, I think, Aaron, no matter where people end up going for a game and having a watch, whether it's in person or at loitv.ie, where all the games, of course, are streamed every week. But do take a chance if you can and get along to a game and support your local side and whoever you're cheering on. Hopefully it all goes well from the weekend. Aaron, the Gremlins were all over the place today, so we're going to cut it short in case they come back and make another reappearance. You can't make them wet too much after midnight, isn't that it with the Gremlins? Or they just multiply?
Absolutely. We'll run quickly before anything else breaks.
I'm showing my age there. Half the audience are going, what are the Gremlins? All right, Aaron, it's been a pleasure. To Erica Burke, who joined us for a chat about her unorthodox journey to the Women's National League and the Women's FAI Cup match-winning status over the last couple of days. We've been, obviously, the Women's National League podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. From Aaron Clark and myself, Breifne and Aaron, we'll be back with you again next week. Talk to you then.